Good morning. Happy Friday. It's Patricia Murphy. This is Seattle Now. This week, Amazon spent billions to buy a movie studio. Seattleites hoping to buy a home saw prices go up again. And America stopped to reflect on a year since the murder of George Floyd. We're breaking it down with the Stranger editor Chase Burns and KUOW producer Brandi Fullwood in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. 3 Tacoma police officers have been arrested and charged for the death of Manuel Ellis in Tacoma PD custody last year.
Justice has already walked out those doors. It walked out those doors the moment Manuel's soul left his body. So now we're just trying to ease pain and develop a system of actual accountability. But justice ain't here.
That's Ellis family attorney James Bible speaking yesterday after State Attorney General Bob Ferguson announced the charges. Officers Matthew Collins and Christopher Burbank are each facing a second-degree murder count. Another officer, Timothy Rankin, is charged with first-degree manslaughter. They each face life in prison if convicted. Mayor Durkin is out with her Seattle rescue plan for how to spend $128 million in federal economic aid. Most of the money would be split between downtown recovery grants, permanent affordable housing, and direct cash payments. The city council will take a look at it next week. Meanwhile, King County approved its own $631 million plan yesterday, with most spending going toward rental assistance, homelessness, vaccinations, and public health. And Seattle was the fastest growing big city in the U.S. last year, according to data from the Census Bureau. Seattle Times reports we grew more than 2%. That's despite stories of people fleeing the city during the pandemic. We're the only city in the top 5 that's outside the Sun Belt. The other fastest growers are Fort Worth and Austin, Texas, Mesa, Arizona, and Tampa, Florida. It's Friday again. This weekend is the unofficial start to summer, and for once, it seems like the weather is going to cooperate. Why not grab some sunscreen and take some time for yourself? Check out the super low tides, go for a walk in the neighborhood. Speaking of neighborhood walks, homeowners in the eastern Washington city of Ephrata were startled this week when they spotted a cougar jumping fences. The cat eventually busted through a screen door and ended up in somebody's living room. Chase Burns is here. He's editor at The Stranger. Chase, what would you do if you walked into your house and saw a cougar in your living room?
Well, first I would run, obviously. But it reminded me when I was reading that story about how I'm happy to live in a very large apartment in the middle of a city, because I imagine that by the time the cougar got up to my floor, I think a few other people would see it, you know?
The cougar would have a TikTok by the time it got to your floor, Chase, for sure, for sure. Brandi Fullwood is here, too. She produces For the Record at KUOW. Brandi, what would you have done if you saw a cougar in your living room?
You know, honestly, I would have to establish some boundaries and say, hey, I'm in a relationship. This isn't for me. No, but actually, I thought about this, and it kind of horrifies me. We're supposed to go camping next week. And so I'm on edge about cougars, bears, everything that could actually be out there in the wild. It's not my jam.
It's hitting a little too close to home. Well, this homeowner called police, who brought in Fish and Wildlife, who tranquilized the poor cougar, passed out in the sink. And I'm going to call out Como for a second, because their headline was like, "Cougar takes a nap." No, cougar did not take a nap. Cougar was busting out the house when he got hit with a tranq dart and passed out in the sink. So let's be real with our headlines. I have seen 2 cougars in my 19 years out in the Pacific Northwest. Both times were a surprise and amazing at the same time. Big week for Amazon. They agreed to pay $8.5 billion to buy movie studio MGM. It's the second biggest acquisition in Amazon histories. Whole Foods, of course, is the biggest. And it means they now have the rights to stream thousands more movies and TV shows, which is good because sometimes I come up empty, honestly, on my Prime, including James Bond. Chase, what do you think about this? Because I'm like, okay, you got the Bond movies.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big purchase, and Amazon already has the biggest streaming library. The data is sort of all over the map here, but one chart that I saw Amazon had like 28,000 movies available already, compared to like Netflix had like 3,800. So it's only going to add to that huge catalog. But I think that the reason that Amazon wants it is because they're able to develop those intellectual properties. And so when you look at like HBO Max and they have like, Rugrats? They're redoing Rugrats. And no, I can't even remember. Paramount Plus is redoing Rugrats. HBO Max is redoing Friends. And so who knows what Amazon's going to dip into and just redo. I think it's a little boring, and we should probably leave the classics where they were. You know what I mean? And when I say classics, I do mean like Rugrats.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Brandi, I wonder if Bezos is going to make a cameo in the next Bond movie since they have a little bit more control, because I saw a picture of him in that giant mechanical suit, you know, and I'm leaning towards that supervillain thing that he already plays in real life.
I feel like I'm there with Chase. I don't know if we need to redo the classics of MGM, whether it's Bond, whether it's The Wizard of Oz, and we definitely don't need any dystopian versions of that with Jeff Bezos starring.
We're kind of living that dream right now. Of course, one of the most interesting, fascinating nuggets out of this is they may get The Apprentice, right? They're getting all of The Apprentice tapes. So there's a potential that, of course, we have former President Trump being himself on videotape there saying terrible, sexist, inappropriate things. Man, we're going to have to hear about this again.
We probably will. Trish, when was the last time you watched The Apprentice?
I think when it was actually like the 90s.
Yeah, I don't know if I was sentient when that show came out.
I actually watched it last week for work. I happen to own the first season of The Apprentice on DVD, and I will tell you that it is miserable, but it is, I guess you could say it's illuminating, but it doesn't really tell us anything that we don't kind of already know about Trump.
That's what I was going to say. Does it even matter at this point? Do we need more confirmation? I grew up in Jersey. I knew who Trump was from the beginning, so I'm not sure that I need to relive this again through this. But no doubt, we will definitely be hearing about it. And of course, Brandi, this MGM deal is just another reminder of how huge Amazon is. And it's really starting to feel inevitable that this company will eventually own all of us in one way or another. And not like in the evil mega corporation way, like in the there's no escape, even if you wanted to way. And that's weird. It's getting harder to avoid this company if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, all dystopian jokes aside, I think it is a big deal. What does that mean Amazon's in control of? I've been thinking about how often people are getting vaccines from Amazon, how the fact that you go grocery shopping with Amazon, and now we're supposed to have them as the basis of our cultural creations of like what we think and what we do. I don't know, like thinking about this, I'm sort of like, will this be bad? Will this lead to a sort of censorship like we saw with Apple TV, where they had to stop production because Tim Cook didn't really want it to happen? That is a concern. What stories are we going to be able to tell? What are they going to sound like? It kind of freaks me out.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like in my house, we have varying degrees of fear about this scenario. Like my husband is like, no, he doesn't like to do anything online. He doesn't like to put his information out there. And I'm kind of like, yeah, okay, well, if we can make a deal, I'll give you my information, you know? And my 15-year-old is like, they know everything. It's just the way it's going to be, you know? So
yeah, it's like, does Amazon like me? Like, am I cool? Like, what are the vibes? Give me the feedback. I'm ready.
Yeah, they certainly know an awful lot about us. That's for sure. This week marked a year since George Floyd's murder. Of course, marches are planned this weekend in Seattle, and we are still dissecting everything that happened last summer. It's also a time, though, to reflect on the huge cultural impact that Floyd's murder and the protests have had on us. For more people, there's been a shift in the way we think about police and police accountability. That's showing up here in Washington state. I'm curious how you two are thinking about this week.
Yeah, you know, I think we wouldn't have seen those charges from the Washington State Attorney General in the Manuel Ellis case, in my mind, if we didn't see the conviction in the George Floyd case. And so obviously accountability is something to be celebrated, but accountability also isn't going to bring back Manuel Ellis or George Floyd or any of the victims of police brutality. When I'm thinking about the Seattle protest last year, I thought that when we would get to this point, this anniversary, that we would be able to have a little bit more clarity. And I'm finding that is not the case, at least for me. Maybe because, there's a lot of details that are still being worked out. There hasn't been great transparency from the SPD and the city, but also just like emotionally, as a reporter who was there almost every day last summer in Capitol Hill, who lives in Capitol Hill, we were gassed in our offices, and me and my staff, I think, have more symptoms of PTSD than we expected. Unpacking that and dealing with that as we go into another year of coverage has been a lot cloudier than I expected.
Yeah.
It takes a moment. Any sort of news anniversary at all, let alone a news anniversary of Black Death, is horribly emotionally excavating. So I don't even know how to reflect fully on a year. I can imagine that I'm still processing a lot and don't even know all of what I'm processing. I think it's felt really sad to think that people, especially news media, are already reaching out to Manuel Ellis's family when they're definitely grieving, like having to publicly grieve and then be bombarded by requests to come on to whatever show or print, whatever medium, to display all of your pain. And I'm sort of tired of seeing people being asked to display their pain, like having to display pain myself. But the one thing I'll say that feels like my better reflection is I've definitely held on to Natasha Marin, who's a Seattle-based artist. She has this project, Black Imagination, and she asks like a ton of Black artists, Black people, to reflect on this idea of imagine a world where you are loved and safe and valued. And it took me out last summer because I was not processing. I was not really engaging with it. I muted almost everything. And to have her come on and say, like, just imagine that, figure that out. And we're not there. So it is angering, it is sad, but it is a marvel to think of like what sort of equity we can establish in housing and education, in mental health resources, in really any other things that we still have to work on. So I'm quite proud of the people that I've gotten to know in the last year who are championing that movement for Black lives.
Well, and Brandi, I'm so glad you said that because I am old and cynical and I've been a reporter for 25 years and I needed to be reminded that this progress is meaningful. Government is a slow machine to change, but that there is value in what's happening right now.
Yeah, value, and that we need actual fundamental change, like at system level, to call it that. I totally feel for the families that are grieving, that are celebrating this moment, and we know that there's a lot more that has to be done to feel any sort of sense of momentum.
Yeah. We're not there yet. One more thing before we go. It turns out Seattle was the fastest growing big city in the country last year. Go figure. Some cities shrunk, according to census data. That includes New York and San Francisco. But Seattle grew more than 2%. What is it about this city? It definitely wasn't the housing prices, because that couldn't be the draw. Brandi, what is it, man?
I'll have to say that I cannot tell that Seattle has grown because so many people I know have left. I haven't had like the mass horde of friends moving to Seattle yet, but the appeal for me, I feel relatively new to Seattle, as I got here and it was super green. Like I've been able to live in a few neighborhoods and like I've lived up in Green Lake, I moved to Cap Hill, and now we're in Queen Anne. I feel like there's appeal for all sorts of people. But I don't know, maybe the people who are coming here, they've got top dollar. They want to buy a house. They want to invest. They want to do it well. Because for me, I will not be buying a house anytime soon unless KUOW bumps up my salary.
Dude, they're going to need top dollar. Prices increased faster this spring than any other time since 2006. Man, Chase, I don't know. The housing prices here. Who is moving here?
I mean, clearly it's people who watched Fox News last summer and they saw that firestorm and they were like, you know what? I want to join the resistance. I'm kidding. It's probably people who want to be a tech trillionaire like Jeff Bezos. That seems like That seems more possible for some people than getting a home. I don't know.
Anarchist tech trillionaires.
Nice. Well, if you're moving to Seattle, you better bring your coin. And we're leaving it there. That's our show for this week. Thanks again to my guests, KUOW producer Brandi Fullwood and editor of The Stranger, Chase Burns. Thanks, you two.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Seattle Now is produced by Clare McGrane, Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our music. I'm Patricia Murphy. Have a great weekend.